right, welcome into Surviving Paradise, the podcast that takes a sometimes serious, oftentimes humorous look at the claim by Jehovah's Witnesses that they are living in a modern-day spiritual paradise. Welcome in. I am your host, Stacy Bauman, formerly an elder, ministerial servant, most importantly, a kid raised in what I think is a unique generation, the 70s and the 80s, as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So again, welcome. I do like to issue a warning at the outset that we try to have a little bit of fun here. We try to create a sense of community, have laughs, have tears, have a wide range of emotions. Just please know it comes from a good place. It is never meant to offend. And in almost every situation or share, it is simply my own experience or observation. So again, okay, welcome in for the third time. Welcome in. I'm here to remind you at the outset of this week's episode that, well, you, dear listener, are flawed. You are less than perfect. And before you take offense, just want to get it out of the way, the same is true of me. We are fundamentally flawed in every way. And because we're such a hot mess, the very fact that we are here today is due to something Jehovah's Witnesses like to call undeserved kindness. And if you're paying attention, the phrase alone is a constant reminder that you don't deserve kindness. Or, for that matter, to even be here at all. Just a gentle, warm, and fuzzy reminder brought to you by the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. And anyone who has been a Jehovah's Witness recognizes the constant reminders that we are all imperfect. In fact, we're drowning in imperfection. Not only do we need Jesus' sacrifice to even get a seat at the table with Jehovah, but he also created a publishing company in upstate New York as a tool to constantly remind each and every one of us, and all of mankind for that matter, that, well, look, at heart, we kind of suck. Sure, there's some good stuff in each of us, but overall, he wants to remind us that without his guys in New York, several millions of books and watchtowers, multiple nights a week in a windowless building known as a Kingdom Hall, and spending our free time on weekends reminding our neighbors that they too aren't exactly the stuff of perfection, that, well, we are still really imperfect. Each and every one of us. And so there is your public service announcement and your reminder as we kick this crazy thing off. And so it really begins for a Jehovah's Witness, a child, an adult, doesn't matter, the pursuit for perfection. Perfection has always been a fascinating subject for me. The very thought that I can have the perfect body, the perfect mind. Wow. You mean I don't already? No, I do not. But the idea that I could has always fascinated me and gripped me. As a teenager, look, here we go. I would picture myself attaining perfection as I learned at the Kingdom Hall. And for me, that meant I wasn't going to look physically, or rather that I was going to look physically like Carl Weathers, the Apollo Creed character in Rocky III. And that was all despite being Caucasian. He is not. I still thought, okay, I'm going to be perfect. I'm going to look like Carl Weathers. He has the perfect physical physique. Didn't matter that was my idea of perfection. It never crossed my mind until I was older that maybe that meant looking like a 170-pound Jewish carpenter with a beard. You know, that guy named Jesus. He was perfect. But going back to when I was even younger, the constant mental reminders I took at meetings on all things perfection, perfect health, perfect conditions, perfect paradise, it all got my mind racing toward the future. And make no mistake, planting the idea of perfection into a kid's head, in my case, a kid from a broken home, a kid that was fairly poor economically. Well, look, the idea of perfection was a dream come true. A perfect life, a perfect body like Carl Weathers. It was all in my head. Not to mention, wow, perfect animals. Wow, a perfect home with a view of the beach. I had imagined all of it. By the way, as we were encouraged to do by the governing body from the stage. Imagine it, picture it, look forward. Staying young forever. Wow. Marrying the perfect woman and making perfect babies. Wow. Look, that message worked on me hook, line, and sinker. And I guess the only reason I don't go any deeper on that is because I was not alone. That is the main message coming out of the mouths of Jehovah's Witnesses. If you just do this, this, and this, you're going to be perfect in every way. But my exposure to this whole idea of perfection came with a wild imagination and lots of questions. I know you're not surprised by this. Do you remember sitting in the back of the car in field service with the other kids, your friends? It's probably a little boy thing. That's the only perspective I have. But we would debate about what perfection meant. We'd heard about it at the hall. We'd heard the adults tell us that we were going to be perfect. We should be striving for that. But we would debate, what does that look like? I'm sure it was different between little boys versus little girls. I guess that's not a very bold statement. But look, for us boys, we pretty much thought we would be superheroes. We would be superheroes. That's where we pictured perfection to be going and what we would look like. We thought we were such deep thinkers, diving into conversations about our borderline superpowers when we were perfect. You can jump off cliffs and never get hurt. Come on, I know I wasn't the only one having these conversations with other little people. Because, when you're perfect, you can do almost anything. And look, we were convinced that being perfect on a paradise earth meant that we would be flying. Let's get this out of the way very early. We feel like Jehovah missed the boat somewhere along the way and that human beings were always meant to fly. They invented airplanes. We can watch the birds. Perfection meant we were going to fly like Superman. That's right. We were perfect in paradise. As we got to the teenage years, I remember thinking that girls would keep their feathered hair forever. It was the late 70s. People cut me some slack. Girls with feathered hair were amazing. They were perfect. And that girls would never need braces. That was a conversation. And I'll never forget thinking how the cutest sisters would never need lip gloss again. Their lips would just be shiny and taste good all the time when they're perfect. Listen, it's called puberty. It's called puberty, people. I was also convinced my wife and every perfect woman would look like Lot's brunette daughter in Story 15 in the original My Book of Bible Stories book. Go ahead and go reference that. And then walk up to me in paradise the way they show Rebecca walking up to Isaac in the very next story in the book, Story 16. I'm getting warm just thinking about it. Well done, Bethel Illustrator. Well done. But again, folks, it was puberty. Come on. But the whole concept of perfection always stuck with me and made for lots of sleepless nights. And it became more and more bizarre as I aged and I matured. I was intrigued by it. I wanted to understand it. What did it really mean to be perfect? How was it even possible? And the only reference point I had on all of this was, you guessed it, the Bible and the guys in New York. You can't even consider the subject of perfection and defining it without going back to the only people that ever possessed it. You remember these two, Adam and Eve. And the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society took us on a journey hand in hand back to Adam and Eve on a regular basis when they were discussing perfection. We're going to throw Jesus out of this conversation for now because come on, he doesn't count. He's a ringer. He's a ringer. I'm talking flesh and blood people, human beings, and perfection. What does it mean? Let's go back. They start this entire conversation for any Jehovah's Witness and any Bible student and anybody interested in it in the book of Genesis. That's where the concept of perfection starts. In the Watchtower of 2010, 1115, page 22, under yet another question from the readers, we get this, quote, Adam and Eve were created perfect morally, spiritually, and physically. They were perfect according to the standards set by their Creator. Because of disobedience, this is where it gets fuzzy, they did not measure up to this standard and therefore lost perfection for themselves and their offspring. Thus, it was through Adam that sin, imperfection, and death were passed on to humankind. And as for the future hope for Jehovah's Witnesses, it goes on to say this: will we ever be able to enjoy the perfection that Adam lost? Yes. Through faith in Jesus' ransom sacrifice, obedient mankind will fully reach a perfect state during Christ's millennial reign, when the Son of God breaks up the works of the devil. 1 John 3:8, end quote. Here's where it starts to get fuzzy when you're talking perfection with or about a Jehovah's Witness. Wait a minute. Even our imperfect brains can see that this does nothing but raise lots and lots of questions. But here is where my brain goes off the rails on the entire subject. And I've got to say this first. Let's get it out of the way. What is the definition of perfection? I chose one such example from the Oxford Languages Dictionary, which says this, quote, the condition, state, or quality of being free or as free as possible from all flaws or defects, end quote. Okay, we've got a scholarly definition outside the 9 guys in upstate New York. So here we go. A few questions, and you've got to start right from the beginning of the concept of perfection. If Adam and Eve were free from all flaws and defects, how in the world did they make an imperfect decision? They were perfect. They wouldn't even know how. They're free of the ability to do so. And I'm going to avoid it because it's a subject of a million episodes. I'm going to avoid the free will rabbit hole today, okay, and all that it entails. If you create something perfect and it's free of defect, how do you ever get to imperfection? Yet another question, wouldn't a perfect person with perfect hearing, perfect emotions, perfect motives see Jehovah's forbidden tree and, well, I don't know, just keep walking? Doesn't perfect understanding and practice of love eliminate making the possibility of an imperfect decision or motive? It seems sort of logical, even with all of the loopholes and black holes and everything else that people will jump into to try to explain how somebody perfect can make imperfect decisions. And so we start down a path that includes nothing more than theories, suppositions, what ifs, and people trying to peek into the mind of Jehovah God himself, despite the Bible itself saying we could never know the mind of Jehovah God himself. See 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11 for proof of that. Listen, all Christian religions begin to define perfection and the concept of being perfect their way. You've heard it before. Well, Adam and Eve's perfection must have been generalized. It must have meant that they had the power to choose. Okay. And they chose badly? Where was their perfect thinking ability when they chose badly? You might remember they were made in God's image. He is the personification of perfection. And well, let's face it, Jehovah's Witnesses fall into that bucket too. They're no different. Trying to explain perfection can get imperfect people tied up in some pretty big knots. And that apparently includes the 9 guys in upstate New York who write magazines for Jehovah and Jesus personally. I give to you the Watchtower of October 2008 under the title, Our Readers Ask, if Adam was perfect, how was it possible for him to sin? And so the theories begin. Quote, it was possible for Adam to sin because God created him with free will. That gift is not at all in conflict with the fact that Adam was perfect. In truth, only God is perfect in the absolute sense. End quote. Wait, what? Wait, what? I'm doing some quick thought, and here's what I'm thinking. The perfect creator made perfect humans in his perfect image, but there was a chance that the perfect man could make imperfect decisions, and the creator made him that way? I'm going to pause there for a minute. And while we're asking a few questions here, when you say only God is perfect in the absolute sense, does that mean he didn't really make us in his image? Only kinda? We were kinda perfect? That might explain a few things about Adam. He was only kinda perfect? And since you reference free will, is it safe for us to conclude we got that from Jehovah too? Pointing at an example with him personally, he used free will himself in not hitting the reboot button, killing Satan, but instead sent him here to earth to hang out with us. But that was good use of free will, right? We're made in his image. We're perfect. He is the personification of perfection. And yet, somewhere in this word salad, we are supposed to believe that, well, perfection means we can make bad decisions. It is a possible outcome. But this little reference from October 2008 continues. It says this, quote, well then, did God create Adam with a moral weakness so that he lacked the ability to make sound decisions or to withstand temptation? Prior to Adam's disobedience, Jehovah God had examined all of his earthly creation, including the first human pair, and had determined that it was very good. Thus, and I'm telling you, pay real close attention to what these guys do here. Thus, when Adam sinned, his creator did not need to correct some design flaw, but rightly placed the blame squarely on Adam. Adam had failed to let love for God and right principle motivate him to be obedient to God above all. End quote. So much to unpack here in one paragraph from the October 2008 Watchtower. Any thinking person can see that they didn't answer the question at all. The question was, did God blow it and make a perfect person who really wasn't perfect after all? You know, a perfect God making imperfect things. Their answer there was nope. He called his human Ken doll good. So, well, it must be good. It's all Adam's fault. He was, made that way. Do you feel nauseous? It's a lot like riding the teacups at Disneyland when you consider or even begin to discuss their definition of perfection, where it started and how it was lost. Welcome to many sleepless nights as a Jehovah's Witness considering what perfection means, since, in all truth, the only time we see it in the Bible, it seems to indicate that, well, Adam was never perfect at all. And without, again, going down the free will rabbit hole, it's a massive black hole for almost all Christian religions as a whole. They throw up all kinds of things about free will, and perfection means your right to decide. Yes, but that seems to rub against the definition of perfection, which means that with perfect thinking faculties, perfect thinking ability, you're going to make perfect decisions. It's not going to be an option to go off the rails. And by the way, if Jehovah says it's good, that just means it's good. We don't have to answer the question. It's pretty simple. Your book, Governing Body, says perfection. We know as human beings how to define perfection in words. You make a perfect human, but they have the ability to make imperfect decisions. And well, that is, at the end of the day, a reflection on the Creator. And well, we are now asking how someone, anyone that is considered perfect, would make decisions that got everyone after them killed. How that person can truly be considered perfect in any way is pretty puzzling. And now we have yet more questions. But would you look at the governing body and you look at their commentary on this idea and the concept of perfection, the one that we as kids, at least with me, thought meant I was going to look like Carl Weathers, I was going to be indestructible, I was going to meet the perfect physical woman, have perfect... All of these thoughts comes down to the fact that Jehovah made his first two people perfect, and well, they didn't end up being perfect after all. Somewhere in that perfect faculty, with all that perfect history, they went off the rails. And by the way, since we have to start there, and it's a story that gets picked on a lot on this show with Adam and Eve, between them and Noah, it's a landslide probably against anything else. But it's now a good time to bring up the snake that got this all kicked off. The snake. Wasn't Satan one of Jehovah's angels? We're told he was. Blessed not only with perfection as a spirit creature, but was hanging out in the void with Jehovah before he made the known universe, before he even created light, before he created stars, the earth, the perfect naked woman. He witnessed it all being created. He may have had a hand in it, for all we know. He hung out with Jesus for who knows how long, but then, with his perfect mind and spirit body, whatever that is, and his perfect experiences and education in place, knowing he could never match Jehovah's power or accomplishments, decides to bail on God and his son, climb into a snake? I got so many questions. Like Satan, you might want to try a lion. That would have been pretty cool. Pretty cool. Lions are cool. But he crawls into a snake, and the perfect spirit creature with perfect thinking, higher than even humans, decides to fight against Jehovah. All the while, we're being reminded, but Satan was an angel and he was perfect, correct? And now for the obvious. This doesn't say much about the perfect God, Jehovah's track record for creating perfect life forms, does it? We have a before space and time perfect creature deciding with his perfect mind to basically sign his own death warrant with the Creator. Then we got Jehovah's newest creation, known as man, using his perfect mind and reasoning ability to do the same. And the woman does it too. But we shouldn't question the Creator on this whole perfection thing, right? Because it doesn't exactly seem, how do I put this, perfect? Like at all? This whole concept of perfection, and particularly as it's taught to you as a Jehovah's Witness, is a rabbit hole from hell. It's an unbelievable brain bender, and one that you can see now as a grown man, middle-aged, I haven't given up on. It still just baffles me until I have moments of lucidity where I realize it's just all BS. Jehovah's Witnesses really struggle to understand what all this perfection talk is really all about. They struggle to define it. They're basically listening in on the guys in New York. For most of us in our time as witnesses, those that may be here now or in the future, many revert to the minds of a child, giving the idea of perfection an almost superhero feel to it. And look, the real question is, why wouldn't they? The book he claims we must read is filled with imperfect people doing superhero things. Imperfect, and they still did superhero things. What does perfection look like? We got a 500-year-old man building an ark. We got Samson killing lions with his bare hands and pushing entire buildings over. Where do I even go with Moses? Plagues, magic stone tablets, copper snakes, water from rocks. We got Joshua making the sun stand still. We got David tearing lions in half and bears. We got him slaying giants. And folks, just a reminder, these are the imperfect dudes that Jehovah loves. I mean, is it only logical that a Jehovah's Witness would think, true perfection must be even better than that, right? Right? I can tell you as a little boy with a Bible stories book in hand, we absolutely believed that. Perfection meant we were going to be indestructible, a very little boy thing to think. But when you go back to the beginning and you start coming forward in time with the only information we have available regarding perfection, well, how do I say this? There's a lot of problems. And it starts with how the entire concept began, the story we just considered. Apparently, it means you can be perfect and make something you say is perfect. It's all good, right? But then, well, it turns out it has the power to be imperfect after all, and that's just not your fault, even though you made him that way. But what do you expect from a God and his organization that portrays Adam with a belly button? Like, why does Adam have a belly button in every illustration in the Watchtower? I was left to conclude that the perfect God who makes perfect things can also miss a few finer details, and it starts with how Jehovah's Witnesses define perfection. And if you want a really just quick snapshot, why does Adam have a belly button in all their illustrations? Don't think he was born of a woman. Missed a few details. No reason to be worried about what perfection looks like. And look, a quick side point. If the definition of perfection all hinges on free will, and that's what a Jehovah's Witness will argue, that's what a governing body member will argue, then I'm going to use mine to be perfect. I think if I am perfect and I have free will, I'm going to make decisions that let me continue to be perfect. But we're told that's not what happened. And so the avalanche of questions are completely valid. Because I guess free will doesn't work that way either. It doesn't work that way. When you're perfect and you have free will, you decide to be imperfect. Makes perfect sense. But what about the witness messaging surrounding perfection? Let's take the faithful slave's claim about perfection at face value, and let's just take a minute to turn off our brains. Click. The vast majority of Jehovah's Witnesses don't actually put much thought to the insanity that I just shared for the last few minutes. No, they're way more attracted to the broader messaging, normal human behavior. When it comes to the concept of perfection, it's all about a future life of perfection. A future perfect mind, perfect body, and more. A perfect paradise earth. It's not here yet. We weren't part of those first two people. It's in the future. And I've somewhat alluded to it, but perfection means, as I just stated, a perfect mind, body, and spirit if you're a Jehovah's Witness. That's an exciting prospect. I think all of us would agree. And you can instantly see why this is so attractive and how they've been able to attract millions of people to their little organization. And that includes some of us listening, including myself. I mean, who doesn't want to be wrinkle-free? Who doesn't want to be disease-free? Who doesn't want the perfect nose? Who doesn't want six-pack abs? Who doesn't want a youthful body? But let's be honest, this is a bold, bold promise that Jehovah's Witness leadership has made in the millions of pages of literature, videos, and much more. When a Jehovah's Witness comes to your door with coffee on their breath from their mid-morning coffee break, they're rarely going to show an illustration of Jehovah and Stephen Lett pelting people with fireballs till their brains seep out. No. The more common thing you're going to see is them showing a picture of a young, gorgeous person or people wearing meeting clothes while visiting a waterfall, holding a pet monkey, and in perfect health. That's the image they want you to see. And look, let's be honest, it works. It works on almost anyone. It's an attention grabber, especially as you begin to age and that perfect body doesn't look the same and it doesn't feel the same. But when pressed on this bold claim of future perfection, they tend to roll out about 4 to 5 Bible verses that, well, if you look at them closely and in context, don't support their fantasy utopian paradise like they claim it does. They just don't. Let's look at one example. I'm going to choose their claim that we will all have perfect mental health in the perfect paradise. And let's be honest, that is attractive to almost everyone. The pressures of depression, anxiety, and whatnot are crippling. It's important to note that in 2019, the World Health Organization estimated 970 million people suffer from mental disorders worldwide. That is a lot of people. 970 million. That weighs so heavily on me to hear that. And look, when you think about that and you're getting a message that you're going to have perfect mental health, free of stress, anxiety, depression, and any other host of mental illness, it's pretty damn attractive. The idea of relief in a perfect world from all that pain is attractive. I give to you the Watchtower #1 from 2023, where it says this, quote, "Through the Bible, God provides guidance and comfort to deal with mental distress. But God has done even more. He has promised to remove the very causes of mental disorders permanently. When God fulfills that promise, never again will painful feelings, mental distress, and hurtful memories be called to mind, nor will they come up into the heart." A quote from Isaiah 65:17. Jehovah's Witnesses will be happy to help you find out when and how God will fulfill this heartwarming promise. End quote. They lead with it. They lead with the concept of perfection. And in this case, perfect mental health. Now imagine in this type of a scenario, you're the householder. You may be suffering from mental illness, and there is a very good chance that you are. 970 million people that they can count. And you ask the Jehovah's Witness to define that promise of perfect mental health. What does that mean? What does that look like? I'm just going to tell you right here and now, prepare for a blank stare. Imagine the look on their face. And maybe you've even experienced this as a Jehovah's Witness at the door, when the householder asks some thinking question, such as, will I still get angry? Will I cry when I'm perfect? I won't remember my family who didn't become Jehovah's Witnesses when I'm perfect, or how the guys in heaven killed them all? What happens when my pet elephant dies? I won't have painful feelings? So what? I'll celebrate? Will I have any emotions when I have perfect mental health? Or will I just walk around smiling all the time? You just read me that verse from Revelation 21:4 that tells me, oh, tears will be wiped away, no more mourning, no more outcry. Isn't crying considered healthy in some cases? Is everything you're describing to me here, dear Jehovah's Witness, perfect mental health? Prepare for the blank stare. Jehovah's Witnesses have been exposed to this concept of perfection, and in this case, mental health, as the example, most of them since they were little kids. But having to explain it? Nah. Outside of talks at an assembly or Watchtower article, most of the knowledge that they've locked into their head as fact came to them from the back seat of a car in field service where everybody just talked theory. They don't know what perfection looks like, and they certainly couldn't tell you what mental health looks like in a perfect state. But my favorite part of that reference I just read regarding perfect mental health is the last sentence. And you remember it where it says, Jehovah's Witnesses will be happy to help you find out when and how Jehovah will help you get perfect mental health. End quote. What? Jehovah's Witnesses can't answer those questions. Jehovah's Witnesses can't even tell you what perfect mental health looks like. I will say boldly and with much sadness that most of them are suffering from mental illness. Clearly, in many cases. But to make a claim that they will tell you when and how Jehovah's going to make you all better mentally and emotionally, it's just a throwaway sentence in a magazine, but it's the kind of claim that someone in desperate straits will hang on to with life and death. They might even have a Bible study. They might even get into a pool and get baptized. They might become a Jehovah's Witness. When you're given that kind of a promise, you consider it in desperate times. A householder just asked them questions from my doorstep, and they couldn't answer one of them. But they want me to believe that they really know when this is going to happen? They now know when? Is this new news? they have a date? Because, that generation was supposed to pass away. Now they overlap. They're all dead. But they know when. Because for a householder or somebody listening, they're eager. They really are. They're eager to have perfect mental health. This concept of perfection rings true to people. They glob onto it. They want it to be true. Just think, some of us read this stuff our entire lives and never clued into what they were saying or what they were doing to us. And it far transcends this whole concept of perfection. That's just one little thing we're looking at here. They claim they have all the answers. Perfection's one of them. And they promise it's going to happen for you. Yeah, you got to do a few things. But if you want perfect mental and physical health, there's only one way to get it, right? I bet you're wondering, wow, how do I get perfect mental health? How do I live on a perfect earth? How do I get perfect? The Awake, April 8th, pages 12 through 14, Perfect Health for All says this quote, perfect health will become a reality under God's kingdom. Jehovah's Word assures us these words are faithful and true. Ask Jehovah's Witness for a free Bible course in your home. They will be happy to help you learn more about the marvelous promises of God. It will be your first step on the route to perfect health. End quote. Your questions about perfection and what perfect mental health looks like, they're all valid. But I'm going to need you to get into a pool at the circuit assembly first before I answer them. But hey, I've got promises of perfection. You can easily see why Jehovah's Witnesses, despite all of the other crap that comes with the organization, have been able to lure certain people in with this kind of messaging. There really isn't anyone you call in field service or you informally witness to that doesn't have a health problem or a mental health problem or any kind of problem. So to tell them I can promise you perfection when they're very often down in the dumps and desperate, it rings true. There are plenty of more references to show you that perfection includes your body and so much more, but we simply have to consider the absurdity of their message regarding something even bigger. A perfect planet Earth and everyday culture and existence. For a Jehovah's Witness or even one of their Bible students, you can't escape the questions or daydreaming that comes with the whole concept of a perfect earth. First, what does that even mean? How do you get to a perfect earth? If you were like me, bored out of your mind at a meeting, and you let your mind even remotely drift to what a perfect earth looks like, you very likely started to also make mental notes and have a whole ton of questions. But let's start with a few facts before we consider all of this. You have to, when you're talking about transforming everything, including the planet we're all sitting on, into perfection. I give you this quote. It says the total land surface area of Earth is about 57,308,738 square miles, of which about 33% is desert and about 24% is mountainous. Subtracting this uninhabitable 57%, which is 32 million plus miles, from the total land area leaves just 24 million plus square miles, or 15.7 billion acres, only 43% of habitable land. End quote. You're thinking, what is he trying to make points for Jeopardy or playing Trivial Pursuit here? No. I share that because what should jump out at anyone in consideration of a perfect paradise earth the next time they get one of those fancy illustrations handed to them at their door on a Watchtower cover is this: 57% of the earth is currently uninhabitable. So when you're pitching a perfect planet, what's the plan with Antarctica? What's the plan with Siberia? What do you have in store for the Sahara Desert? Because listen, lots of perfect people with perfect health who will never die are going to be arriving soon. And I'm guessing that 57% that's currently, 43% that is currently habitable is going to fill up really quick. But never mind. I love those pretty pictures of people roaming around with animals eating grapes. I couldn't help but notice you never show those same shots in the sub-freezing North Pole or a waterless desert. So, I get it. This picture of paradise looks nice in Yosemite or in, Colorado or some other paradise-type destination. But what about all the rest of the planet? What's the plan to get the Earth perfect? You see, this conversation for any Jehovah's Witness, they've had this. We've all debated it when we're bored out of our minds in field service or at a meeting or just in a conversation. So from there, the idea that the entire Earth can be perfect, which is so incredible and deep to dive into. But from there, cue the fantasy sequences. Entire car groups coming up with theories on how perfect people will make a perfect planet without, ever wondering what's going to happen to something like mosquitoes. No mosquitoes equals no fish, no birds, no bats, no frogs, and will even cause many plants to be extinct. What's the plan on the mosquitoes on this perfect Earth? Still going to be able to get malaria? Will they still exist? Are we looking at species being wiped out? Will they bite us on a perfect planet? Do they really need to suck our blood? Because, no more disease, right? And look, that's just one off the top of my head question. I already mentioned the landmass. And I know I'm far from alone because I lived inside these conversations with people, oftentimes other elders. Like, what's going to happen? The Earth, it's only 43% of it is livable, 57 isn't. It's freezing, it's too hot, there's no water. What's the plan? And cue the fantasy sequence and all of the theories. Jehovah's got, 1,000 years, we're gonna plow the fields, we're gonna work in the desert. At the same time, have Bible studies with all the people that are being resurrected. Somebody's gonna be making khakis because that's what everybody wears. Somebody will make sundresses. Yep. Somebody's got to pick all the fruit, from the trees. Meanwhile, we're going to be plowing the earth, the landmass of the North Pole, Antarctica, the Sahara Desert. We're just going to turn it into a walking, talking paradise. I mean, nobody puts any thought to the fact that these 9 guys in upstate New York are pumping millions of people with the idea of a perfect earth without an ounce of detail or supporting evidence. But despite the endless messaging around a perfect life on a perfect planet, as in it's the main message of Jehovah's Witnesses, let's be honest, they also tell you to stop thinking about all of it. That's right. In one talk, it could be a morning symposium at a circuit assembly. Picture yourself there, brothers, in a paradise earth with a perfect body. Stacy, you'll look like Carl Weathers. You'll have superhuman powers. Yeah, picture that. By the afternoon, or when you go home, you then get this message from the same guys pitching the perfect fantasy. The Watchtower Study Edition, June 15th, 2000. Perfect Life, Not Just a Dream is the title. Quote, what will perfect life be like? Instead of competition and selfish ambition, love and kindness among humans will make life worth living, eliminating anxiety and low self-esteem. Yet a perfect life will not be boring or monotonous. God's Word does not provide all the details about paradise, but does describe the kind of life we can expect. End quote. Okay, I see where this is going. And then they address the questions we've all had when considering what perfection looks like. And look, I'd be shocked if anyone who's taken the time to listen to this nutty ramble hasn't had similar conversations. What's it look like? What will I look like? What's perfection mean? They say this in the same article, The Watchtower, June 15th, 2000. Quote, rather than wondering about what kind of entertainment, shopping facilities, technology, or transportation the kingdom will provide, imagine yourself enjoying the fulfillment of these words. Quote, the wolf and the lamb themselves will feed as one, and the lion will eat straw just like the bull, and as for the serpent, his food will be dust. They will do no harm nor cause any ruin in all my holy mountain, Jehovah has said. How different perfect life will be from what you find today. If you come to be one of those counted worthy to live at this time, you will have reason for confidence that your loving Heavenly Father will take an interest in you and your family. End quote. First of all, whew, so you're saying I have a chance. I really miss those paragraphs where it gives you the kind of open-ended, it might work for you, it might not. If you come to be one of those counted worthy, you might be there. Jehovah might love you and your family. But look, governing body, I still have questions about perfection. You tell us to not be thinking about what it looks like, even though in a talk you probably tell us to think about what it looks like. Nauseous. You tell us not to be thinking about what it looks like or to have too many questions. Because you're thrusting this on everyone. You're going to be perfect. If you just do this, you'll be perfect. You're going to have a perfect body. Yeah, rah, rah. Okay, what's that look like? Oh, no, don't ask. Don't ask. But since you mentioned entertainment, which was odd, what does that look like exactly in a perfect world? And if you're following my line of thinking, which I know is very difficult, you know that I'm stabbing at the concept of perfection. Entertainment. What does that look like? Movies featuring people eating perfect fruit, hugging each other, and then the credits roll? That's what a movie looks like in paradise. Shopping facilities. You mentioned those. Won't we all be going back to walking around in the nude? Like Adam and Eve? Who needs to shop for clothes? I mean, perfection. It's defined right there in the book you tell me I need to access. That they were perfect when they were naked, and the second they made a bad decision, the first thing they realize is, oh my God, people could see me naked. And look, if I've got a perfect body, I'm going to want to show it off, people. I'm going to sport it. But then you go on to mention in this paragraph technology and transportation, all good questions a Jehovah's Witness would have. What does a perfect wireless signal look like in paradise? Because you've got a website. Jesus has a website to run. And I hate when the wireless drops off. You mentioned transportation. And again, you notice the four things they choose here because they know people are asking these questions. But you mentioned transportation. We surely won't ride around on our perfect animal friends anymore, right? And where does the perfect fuel come from? As we use machines to rebuild the earth and push all those people faking to be not at homes during Armageddon, just push them all into huge graves, or to build your perfect paradise complexes like you have in upstate New York. Surely we're going to use machines and have transportation, right? Where's the fuel come from? Oh. The reality is, on this subject of perfection, the answer is don't ask. Got it. Apparently, perfection and the concept of perfection also means don't be curious and don't ask questions. Perfect people don't do that. Which, again, kind of lends itself back to the garden with people, free will, robots. I'll let you figure it out. They twist themselves in knots trying to explain what perfection looks like on a paradise earth, right down to our power to decide with our then perfect brains. But see if our currently imperfect brain can pick up anything on what I'm about to read to you within sentences of each other. The Watchtower of 1971, August 15th, pages 497 to 500, the article Perfection, What Does It Really Mean? Gives us this, quote, what does perfection really mean? Do you know what the Bible's teaching on it is? Would it appeal to you to live in perfection on this earth? Or do you think perfection would take all the challenge out of living, make it mechanically regular, stale? End quote. Actually, that was one of my questions. The prospect of everlasting life in itself will challenge those living in God's new order to learn more and more, to learn about the wonderful earth on which they live and the enormous variety of created things that God has made. It will challenge everyone's productivity, initiative, resourcefulness, and enterprise, ingenuity, and originality. What each person produces in the way of homes, gardens, dress, handcraft, and works of art will reflect his own personal preferences and purpose, though all in harmony with the will of God. Disclaimer. This will assure unending variety earthwide, never sameness and monotony. End quote. Oh, there's so much I want to do here. It continues, though. Since he is the maker, the producer, he knows what he wants, and he has the full right to decide what the standards of excellence and perfection shall be in his activity and creation. Because humans, they were not made to be machines or to perform like machines. End quote. So there it is. The guys in New York trying to first encourage you to think about perfection, then not think about perfection, at least not in detail, and then assuring you that you're never going to be bored, that you weren't meant to be a robot, mechanical, stale. Perfection, in other words, means you can be a painter as long as you paint what Jehovah wants you to paint. I think we call this a bit of a paradox. It's a bit of a paradox. And again, you can almost immediately, in this concept of perfection, go right back to the Garden of Eden. There we go. Same story. Wait, I'm a perfect person with perfect free will and the perfect power to decide, perfect body, perfect earth, but I still have to do it your way or what? I mean, the concept of perfection clearly comes with a ton of questions. I'm barely scratching the surface. But how about we tackle one more? How did we get here? How did we get here? We've kind of tackled with Adam and Eve, but maybe it's more appropriately to say, how do we get there? How do we take the hot mess we are today and work towards perfection according to what Jehovah's Witnesses believe and what they tell people? And look, that's right. If you weren't aware, Jehovah's Witnesses are taught that Jehovah is going to rain fire down on everyone not attending meetings. He's going to open the earth here and there and swallow people. He's going to have other assorted natural disasters to kill everyone that he doesn't like. But all the survivors will watch on And then they will enter a 1,000-year period where they will, quote, grow to perfection. During this time, apparently, after witnessing a massive bloody slaughter, well, even with the 1,000 years, the gig still is not yet up. I give you the teaching from their own mouths. What does the Bible really teach book? Pages 213 and 214, which says this: Judgment Day will give billions of people their first opportunity to learn about God's will and to conform to it. This means that a large-scale educational work will take place. However, not all will be willing to conform to God's will. These wicked ones will be put to death permanently during Judgment Day. Pay close attention to the next sentence. By the end of Judgment Day, surviving humans will have come to life fully as perfect humans. Judgment Day will thus see the restoration of mankind to its original perfect state. Then a final test will take place. Satan will be released from his imprisonment and allowed to try to mislead mankind one last time. Those who resist him will enjoy the complete fulfillment of the Bible's promise. The righteous will possess the earth and they will live forever on it. Yes, Judgment Day will be a blessing to all faithful mankind. End quote. The subject is perfection, and I'm all over the board. And I'm sorry. But this whole journey to get to perfection sure is tricky, isn't it? You're never really safe with Jehovah and his guys from New York that at that point will then be in heaven. You're never really arrive. There is always just one more test. When you're the God who reads hearts and you've been watching us for 1,000 years, you still have your doubts. And his favorite son is still around. Did I mention that? That's right. Satan has been grounded this whole time. He's been grounded. But when you need to see if someone really loves you after 1,000 years, you tap your favorite perverted killer on the shoulder and send him back into the game. Does it ever really end? I just want to be perfect. You got me on my door with this whole talk of perfection, of perfect health, of perfect mental health, of a perfect earth, of perfect animals. Does this ever really end? But here's my latest WTF moment. How exactly are we to believe or understand a person grows to perfection? Gotta tell you, I jumped into the book known as the Bible that you promote so heavily. I haven't seen any examples of someone, quote, growing to perfection. Keep in mind that in the ultimate brain bender, Jehovah is apparently going to have a great crowd of survivors and resurrect a few more billion people. But all of us, whether great crowd or resurrected, are still sinners. We're still making mistakes. We're still imperfect on a fast track growing, or so we're told, to perfection. That's right. Still not perfect, meaning we're still sinning during the 1,000 years. We're probably doing it a lot. So how is that going to work? Is there some sort of a graph showing we are a little more perfect today than yesterday? We're growing, right? How are we going to be able to progress to perfection while simultaneously still sinning and risking being hit with a fireball if reaching a bad conclusion maybe 100 years into this thing? It doesn't add up. What happens, I should say, if I get hammered a few times in the first 100 years of this 1,000-year reign as I'm growing to perfection? Is it overlooked if I'm doing it with Noah? He's got a drinking issue too. What happens if I'm flirting with a woman at year 483? Is it overlooked if I'm a little more perfect, or if I'm chasing the ladies with King David and Solomon? They have some problems with the ladies too. We're just growing to perfection. What is the sin, and how many sins is it that gets me instantly erased as someone who doesn't seem to be interested in being perfect on my journey of growth into perfection? Also, in all honesty, I'm a little more perfect today than yesterday. Haven't we been through enough at this point? I made it to this 1,000-year reign thing. I'm growing to perfection. Can you cut us some slack? We followed Stephen Lett and his buddies. We pioneered. We skipped college. We survived Jehovah's latest genocide. Isn't it enough already? Can we just be perfect now? Nope. Oh, and one last thought. Has anyone found any, and I mean one, scriptural proof for this entire "they will grow to perfection" thing during 1,000 years? No? Funny, I wasn't able to either. I wonder where that came from. It's truly mind-boggling. And again, I want to say I'm rambling, and I'm scratching the surface of this concept and this whole teaching of perfection by Jehovah's Witnesses. But as you might expect, I've got a few strays. I've got a few random thoughts on all things perfection from decades of sleepless nights. Maybe they're only entertaining to me, but maybe you'll laugh. Maybe you'll think about something I'd love to hear. Here's a few. Is there some sort of meter for measuring the rate of progress I'm making toward perfection? How are we to know when we are perfect and, superhero perfect status? We're really ready to face Satan. Yet again, he's still around after thousands of years, 1,000 years, I should say, of Jehovah reading our hearts, but still not quite sure if we deserve to be there or not. He's going to let us get, exposed to Satan again. How about another? If Jehovah's Witnesses are going to grow to perfection and return to the original perfect condition of Adam and Eve, why, oh why, does all the literature show people wearing clothes? It's a serious question. You remember their first concern upon becoming imperfect was that they were naked. So Genesis 3:7 says they grabbed a fig leaf to cover their junk. There are so many jokes here, but I'll leave it alone for the sake of the question. Won't all perfect Jehovah's Witnesses go back to walking the earth in the nude? Gotta tell ya, that was the original purpose. And guess what? It was perfect. A perfect purpose given to us by the perfect Creator. Why are people wearing khakis and sundresses and all your stuff? How about this? All this counsel, all the literature, all the conventions, the talks, the videos that comment on perfection are written and given to us by guys that are imperfect. Is there any chance they got everything I've shared here or everything they've ever said on the subject wrong? Is there just a chance, even a teeny weeny chance, that these imperfect guys shouldn't be commenting on what perfection looks like? How exactly can an imperfect mind ever grasp the perfect definition of perfection? I can kind of tell you what a woman is, but I'm not a woman, so I'm never going to be able to tell it quite the way she could. Maybe they don't understand perfection at all, since, I don't know, they're imperfect? Just a thought. What does perfection look like if all the horses start a stampede and run over a group of kids? Everybody's perfect, the horses are perfect, the kids are perfect. Do the perfect kids just bounce up from the dust and say, "No worries, I'm perfect, nothing hurts me"? Or does perfection even work with the animals? And listen, how could it? The animals are going to have to die, or we will have animal population issues on the perfect earth, which of course starts the brain spinning with the realization that we will all still be facing death itself, if only with our animals. our pets in a perfect paradise Earth. Going back to the 70s on some of these folks, I was a little guy. When considering perfection on the Earth, will a perfect Earth have perfect weather? How are you going to manage that? That could be interesting. No more storms, no more water, or maybe it is water or not water. How about this? I'm going to get into my weirdness here. What will we dream about when we're perfect? It's well known that when you go to bed at night and you have dreams, and boy, are they just nuts sometimes, that you're working out problems, you're challenging yourself, you're rising to the occasion. There's allegory and symbolism and everything, and our brain is working it out. What are we going to dream about? Yeah, I did love Blade Runner, by the way. Great movie. If you get the reference, you know. But what are we going to dream about? What are we now looking forward to if we're perfect? Another lettuce wrap? Another sunset we've seen 10 billion times? Another perfect orgasm? What are we looking forward to when we're perfect? And finally, on this journey to perfection during the 1,000 years, if a guy sins, and again, not sure why he is, he's a little more perfect today than yesterday, does he just disappear and we all laugh about it at dinner? Hey, did you see what happened to Bill? I didn't. He's gone. Oh, well. Poor resurrected Tom, despite being 37% perfect, he just couldn't give up the idea that he didn't want to live alone for all eternity and stop screaming at Jehovah about it. He was so close to living in a perfect world, alone for all eternity, but he just couldn't, deal with it. He was so close. Oh, the irony. The irony. This whole concept of perfection and teaching it to people and going to their doors and giving them any kind of false hope on it is just unbelievable. There's so many more things I could say. But let's have some fun and include some of yours in your comments with this crazy episode. I can't wait to see if you even had a clue what I was talking about the last hour. But here's the thing. This is truly the hope of every Jehovah's Witness today. Perfection means living on a perfect earth, praising Jehovah, while Jesus, Stephen Lett, Judge Joe Rutherford, Chuck Russell, the Apostle Peter, Nathan Knorr, and Sam Hurd all look on as we praise the heavens. There isn't much we know about what happens once you're really perfect. The record stops there. Isn't that interesting? Witnesses are taught that there are other scrolls that have not yet been opened, and apparently there's a whole bunch of really good stuff in there, but we don't know what they are. And we don't know what perfection really looks like, and we don't know what the future has in store. But I ask you, dear listener, what is your definition of perfection? If your idea of perfection is being young forever, living in a world where you go sailing on the ocean or work in the garden in your meeting clothes, where apparently shaving is still required as our weekly meetings to continue reading the Bible and talk about it. Why? Well, we aren't sure, but we've seen in videos that will include reviewing fun stuff from the past with people like the prophet Daniel. That's right, 5 million years later, we're still talking about that lion's den, despite the fact that we've all had pet lions for 5 million years. It still has its power. We're going to talk about it. Or where you might be married, or you might be alone forever, depending on when you died. You and your former wife from the old world staring at each other, but living alone for all eternity. Or maybe perfection is where you will eat fruit and veggies, night after night, after night, after month, after year, after billions of years, fruits and veggies. Or maybe it's where you watch kids not playing Star Wars, but reenacting car groups in field service, because look, it's all they know about the old world now. Or maybe it's where you can meditate night after night as to whether you praise Jehovah enough again that very day. Or maybe You might be thinking, will he ever let Satan out to play again if someone gets out of line after 7 billion years of perfection? Or maybe perfection means, or maybe perfection is, or maybe perfection. So I ask you, what is your definition of perfection? More importantly, what is your definition of a living hell? I want to thank you for listening. Wherever you may be perfectly well. We'll see you next week.